This is a powerful and meaningful story that will undoubtedly leave us with a valuable lesson. Imagine being falsely accused of a crime you didn't commit simply because of how you look. That's exactly what happened to Nathan, a bright young student who found himself at the center of an unjust accusation. But what started as an ordinary day quickly spiraled into a battle for truth, justice, and a reckoning that no one saw coming. Stay with me. This is a story you won't forget. Hi everyone. Welcome to Narrated Tales, where every story touches the heart. Today I am very happy to share a new story with you. Let's get started. Nathan Williams adjusted his backpack as he walked home from school, his headphones snugly covering his ears. The warm afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the quiet streets, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees lining the sidewalk. It was one of those peaceful moments where he could escape into his own world. Just him, his music, and the rhythmic sound of his footsteps on the pavement. He had always preferred walking home rather than taking the bus. It gave him time to clear his mind, to reflect on the day's events, and to indulge in his favorite pastime, reading. The book tucked under his arm was a classic, one he had already read twice but couldn't seem to put down. Today he planned to stop by Riverdale Park, a serene little oasis in the middle of the city, to read a few more chapters before heading home. As he stepped into the park, the scent of fresh-cut grass filled the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of blooming flowers. A few joggers passed by, their sneakers softly tapping against the pavement, while a couple of children giggled near the swings. The park was a blend of city life and tranquility, a place where people from all walks of life coexisted, at least for a brief moment in their day. Nathan scanned the area, looking for a quiet spot. His eyes settled on a shaded wooden bench near a small pond, a perfect place to sit and read undisturbed. He took a seat, pulled his book from his backpack, and adjusted his posture, settling in for a peaceful afternoon. A few feet away, Richard and Linda Howard, a well-dressed white couple in their 40s, were lounging on a blanket, basking in the sun. They looked like the embodiment of suburban comfort. Richard, in his polo shirt and designer sunglasses, lay back on his elbows while Linda adjusted her sun hat, ensuring just the right amount of shade covered her face. Their 10-year-old son, Noah, sat a few feet away, hunched over his phone, completely absorbed in a mobile game. For the first 15 minutes, everything was as peaceful as Nathan had hoped. The gentle rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, the occasional bark of a dog. It was the perfect backdrop to his book. Then came the scream. Linda shot upright, her hand clamping over her mouth. "My bag!" she shrieked, scrambling to her feet. Her designer handbag lay open beside her, its contents scattered across the grass. Her face contorted in shock as she frantically sifted through the items. Richard immediately bolted upright. "What happened?" "The money! The cash I had. It's gone!" Linda's voice rose in pitch, drawing the attention of nearby parkgoers. Noah, momentarily distracted from his game, looked up. "What? You lost money?" "It was right here. I had at least a few $100s in there," Linda stammered, her breath quick and uneven. Richard's gaze flicked around the area, searching for anyone suspicious. Then his eyes landed on Nathan. Nathan, unaware of the chaos unfolding just a few feet away, turned a page in his book, completely engrossed in the story. Linda followed her husband's gaze. Her eyes narrowed. "Him!" she said through gritted teeth. "That boy! He's been sitting right there this whole time!" Nathan finally noticed the disturbance. He looked up, confused, as Linda stormed toward him, Richard following closely behind. "You!" Linda's voice was sharp, accusatory. "You were sitting right there. Did you see anything?" Nathan blinked, taken aback by her tone. He removed his headphones, lowering his book. "Excuse me." "Don't play dumb," Richard snapped. "My wife's bag was right next to you, and now her money is gone." Nathan's stomach clenched. He could feel the heat of their stares, the intensity of the growing crowd's curiosity. "I didn't see anything," he said calmly. Linda scoffed. "Oh, please. You were sitting right here. You expect us to believe that you didn't see someone take the money?" Nathan exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to react. He had experienced situations like this before. Accusations thrown without evidence. Assumptions made based on nothing but the color of his skin. I was reading my book, he replied evenly. I had my headphones on. I didn't see anything. Richard took a step closer, his presence looming. Then maybe you're the one who took it. Nathan's heart rate spiked. Are you serious? Linda crossed her arms. We are calling the police. The words sent a chill down Nathan's spine. His body tensed, but he kept his expression neutral. He knew how quickly these situations could escalate. You can't be serious, Nathan said, his voice controlled but firm. I didn't take anything. Then you won't mind if they check your bag, Richard said. Nathan clenched his jaw. He had nothing to hide, but the idea of being treated like a criminal for no reason filled him with resentment. Around them, the park had grown eerily quiet, people watching but not interfering. Before Nathan could protest, a police officer arrived. A tall, broad-shouldered white man in uniform. His badge read, Officer Bradley. What's going on here? Bradley asked, his gaze bouncing between Linda's distressed expression and Nathan's guarded posture. My wife's money was stolen, Richard said quickly. This kid was sitting right next to it. Bradley's eyes settled on Nathan. Son, mind if I check your bag? Nathan inhaled sharply. He had been in this world long enough to know that refusing would only make things worse. Slowly, he unzipped his backpack and handed it over. Bradley rifled through it. Books, pens, a water bottle, and about $50 in cash. Linda's lips curled. See? He has money. Nathan's fingers curled into fists. It's my money. I had it before I even got here. Richard let out a dry laugh. Oh, sure. Convenient, isn't it? Bradley examined the contents but found nothing matching Linda's description of the stolen amount. He looked uncertain, but Linda wasn't backing down. He must have had help, she insisted. He took it and gave it to someone else before we noticed. Bradley hesitated, but then nodded. We need to take him to the station for further questioning. Nathan's pulse pounded in his ears. What? You just searched my bag. You didn't find anything. Doesn't mean you're innocent, Bradley replied coolly. We'll sort it out at the station. Nathan knew arguing was pointless. His shoulders squared as he forced himself to remain calm. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him panic. As the officer reached for his wrist, preparing to escort him away, Nathan caught sight of the onlookers, some whispering, others avoiding his gaze entirely. No one spoke up. No one stood for him. And in that moment, Nathan realized that to them, he was already guilty. Nathan sat in the back of the police cruiser, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. The car rumbled forward, taking him away from the park, away from the life he had always known. A life where he was just another kid trying to get through school, trying to enjoy a book on a quiet afternoon. The tinted windows distorted the world outside, making everything look darker, more ominous. He could still hear Linda's shrill voice in his head, accusing him without a second thought. They didn't care about the truth. They had already decided he was guilty. Beside him, Officer Bradley sat with a rigid posture, his fingers tapping against the steering wheel. His radio crackled with background noise, but neither of them spoke. Nathan could feel the officer's occasional glances in the rearview mirror, like he was expecting some sort of outburst, some confirmation of his guilt. Nathan forced himself to remain still, even as the anger simmered beneath his skin. He had done nothing wrong, but that didn't seem to matter. The car pulled up to the station, a gray brick building with barred windows. As they walked inside, Nathan felt the stares from other officers, some curious, others indifferent. A few exchanged whispers, their gazes flickering toward him as if he were just another statistic. Bradley led him to a cold interrogation room, where the walls were painted a dull, lifeless beige. A single metal table stood in the center, with 2 chairs on either side. Sit, Bradley ordered. Nathan did as he was told, keeping his face neutral. A moment later, another officer entered the room, a tall, middle-aged man with graying hair and a sharp gaze. His nameplate read, Detective Monroe. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he studied Nathan like he was trying to figure out what kind of person he was dealing with. All right, son, Monroe said finally, lowering himself into the chair across from Nathan. Let's make this easy. Tell me what happened. Nathan inhaled deeply. I was sitting on the bench reading. I had my headphones in. I didn't see anything until that woman started yelling. Monroe folded his hands on the table. And you expect me to believe that? Nathan's patience wavered. He had been cooperative. He had let them search his bag, Let them bring him here like he was some criminal. And yet, the doubt in Monroe's voice made it clear. They weren't interested in believing him. "It's the truth," Nathan said, his voice firm. Monroe leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Tell me about the $50 in your bag." Nathan exhaled sharply. "That's my money. I had it before I even got to the park." "Can anyone confirm that?" Nathan clenched his jaw. "I didn't think I needed someone to vouch for me every time I carried cash." Monroe tapped his fingers against the table. "Listen, son, if you just tell us who you handed the rest of the money to, things will go a lot smoother for you." Nathan's head snapped up. "I didn't take anything. There was no rest of the money." Bradley scoffed from the corner. "That's not what Linda Howard says." Nathan turned to him, his frustration bubbling over. "Of course she says that." "She assumed I was guilty before she even looked for any real proof." Bradley folded his arms. "It's funny, isn't it? The second she realizes her money is missing, you just happen to be sitting right there? Seems awfully convenient." Nathan let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, real convenient. A black kid in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's all it takes, right?" A tense silence followed. Monroe's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Before either of them could say another word, the door swung open. A man in a dark gray suit stepped inside, his presence commanding the room instantly. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, and his sharp blue eyes locked onto Nathan. It was Samuel, the Williams family's longtime estate manager and trusted confidant. He didn't spare Bradley or Monroe a glance. Instead, he walked straight to Nathan and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Williams will not be answering any more questions," Samuel said, his tone crisp, professional. "He is a minor, and this interrogation is over." Monroe sighed. "Sir, we were just having a conversation." "Funny," Samuel replied, tilting his head, "because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were attempting to intimidate a 16-year-old into confessing to something he didn't do." Bradley scoffed. "And who the hell are you?" Samuel finally turned to him, his gaze unwavering. "Samuel Greaves, estate manager of the Williams family." "You've heard of Elias Williams, I assume?" Bradley blinked. For the first time since this ordeal began, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Elias Williams wasn't just another wealthy businessman. He was one of the most influential figures in the country, a billionaire with ties to government officials, media conglomerates, and legal powerhouses. Samuel's lips pressed into a thin line. "Nathan is free to go." Now, Bradley exchanged a glance with Monroe, but it was clear that the mood in the room had shifted. Monroe exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "Fine," Monroe muttered. "But don't leave town, kid." Samuel smiled tightly. "Oh, don't worry, we'll be around. But rest assured, you'll be hearing from our legal team very soon." With that, he guided Nathan out of the interrogation room. As they walked through the station, Nathan could still feel the eyes on him, still hear the murmurs. But this time, he didn't feel small. This time, he knew. This wasn't over. Nathan sat in the back seat of the sleek black sedan, staring out of the window as the city lights blurred past. The adrenaline from the station had worn off, leaving behind a simmering frustration that he couldn't shake. Samuel sat beside him, his posture composed as always, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. "You did well back there," Samuel finally said, breaking the silence. "You kept your composure." Nathan let out a hollow laugh. "Didn't feel like I had much of a choice?" Samuel turned to him, his expression unreadable. "That's exactly why it matters. Some people expect you to lose control, to react in a way that confirms their worst assumptions. You didn't give them that satisfaction." Nathan didn't respond. He knew Samuel was right, but the injustice of it all still gnawed at him. By the time they pulled into the long driveway of the Williams estate, the weight of everything that had happened settled onto Nathan's shoulders. The grand mansion stood tall against the night sky, its towering windows glowing warmly, a stark contrast to the cold interrogation room he had been in just an hour ago. As soon as he stepped inside, he saw his father standing in the middle of the foyer, arms crossed. Elias Williams was a man whose presence could command a room without a single word. Even in his late 50s, his sharp features and calculated gaze carried an air of authority that few dared to challenge. "Nathan," Elias said, his deep voice even but laced with concern. Nathan exhaled. "Dad, Elias held up a hand. I already know. Samuel cleared his throat. I briefed him on the way back. Elias's jaw tightened, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned and started walking toward his study. Come with me. Nathan followed, Samuel close behind. Once inside, Elias closed the door and turned to face his son. They detained you, interrogated you. Over nothing. Nathan swallowed. They thought I stole the money. Of course they did, Elias said, his voice laced with quiet fury. Because to them, a black kid sitting near the scene of the crime is more incriminating than actual evidence. Nathan had never seen his father this angry before. Not like this. Elias Williams was a man known for his control, his ability to outmaneuver any opponent without so much as raising his voice. But now, standing in his study, his father's usual restraint was cracking at the edges. They didn't even have proof, Nathan muttered. They just assumed. Elias took a slow breath, regaining his composure. And that, my son, is why we're going to make sure they regret it. Nathan frowned. What do you mean? Elias turned to Samuel. Did you find anything on the Howards? Samuel nodded and placed a thick folder on the desk. Plenty. Their company, Howard and Company, has been under investigation for financial fraud and tax evasion. They've been falsifying records for years. And guess what? Their audit is due next month. A well-placed tip to the right people could accelerate the process. Elias's lips curled into a cold smile. Good, Nathan's eyes widened. You're taking down their entire company. They accused my son of being a thief, Elias said simply. I think it's only fair that we expose them as the real criminals. Nathan exhaled, still processing the weight of what his father was doing. And what about the police? Samuel asked. Elias's expression darkened. Bradley is a liability to the department. This isn't the first time he's overstepped his authority. With the right push, he'll be gone. Nathan stared at his father. How do you know all this? Elias smirked. Son, power isn't about how much money you have. It's about knowing who to call when you need things done. Nathan wasn't sure how to feel. On one hand, he wanted justice. But was this justice or revenge? Elias seemed to sense his hesitation. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. You're a good kid, Nathan, but the world isn't fair. You learned that today. And sometimes when people show you who they are, you make sure they never get the chance to do it again. Nathan swallowed hard, nodding. The next few days were a blur. First, the Howard's company was hit with a full-scale federal investigation. Reports of fraud, tax evasion, and illegal business practices flooded the news. Investors pulled out. Their assets were frozen. By the end of the week, Howard and Company was collapsing. Then came the arrest. Richard and Linda Howard were taken into custody. The very police department that had so eagerly detained Nathan now had to face the irony of arresting the real criminals. Nathan watched the news, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. But it wasn't over. A week later, Officer Bradley was officially dismissed from the force. Internal Affairs had launched an investigation into his conduct, and the Williams family's lawyers made sure every past complaint against him was brought to light. Nathan stood in his father's study, staring at the news reports. He turned to Elias. So, we won? Elias studied his son for a moment before nodding. Justice was served. Nathan wasn't sure how to feel. The people who had humiliated him had paid the price. But the memory of that moment in the park, of being powerless, of knowing that no one would speak up for him, still lingered. Elias watched his son closely. What is it? Nathan hesitated. It shouldn't have taken all this. I shouldn't have needed you to step in. The truth should have been enough. Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. But it wasn't. And that's why people like us don't just wait for justice. We make it happen. Nathan let those words settle. Later that night, he sat alone in his room, staring out at the city skyline. He thought about all the people who weren't lucky enough to have someone like his father, people who were wrongly accused, people who didn't have the resources to fight back. This time, he had been saved. Next time, he wanted to be the one doing the saving. A month later, Nathan stood in front of a crowded auditorium, a microphone in his hand. The audience was silent, waiting. He took a deep breath and spoke. My name is Nathan Williams. A few weeks ago, I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit. Not because of evidence, not because of proof, but because of what I looked like. A murmur ran through the crowd. Nathan continued, his voice steady. I was lucky. I had people to fight for me. But not everyone does. That's why I'm here. To make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. The applause was deafening. And in that moment, Nathan knew. This was only the beginning. And that, my friends, is the story of Nathan Williams. A young man who faced injustice but refused to be broken by it. This is more than just a story. It's a reflection of the world we live in, where assumptions can be dangerous, and power can be both a weapon and a shield. It reminds us that truth alone is not always enough. Sometimes justice needs to be fought for. But most importantly, it teaches us that standing up, speaking out, and refusing to be silent can change lives. Not just our own, but for those who come after us. What do you think about this story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? Let's start a conversation. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.